Chosen One, what I'm about to share with you may shake everything you thought you knew about yourself. If you're hearing this message right now, it's not by coincidence. Something divine is unfolding within you. Before the eyes of the world, your mortal body has crossed into godhood. Scientists are speechless, ancient historians are stunned, and the sacred scholars who have searched for truth across time now realize their studies were pointing toward you. The ancient researchers have uncovered something holy about your being. They've found that every god throughout history experienced sacred changes within the body before ascending, and now you are feeling that same transformation. The lost writings of Egypt, the forgotten scrolls of Greece, and the secret inscriptions buried beneath the sands of time all tell the same story. They were never speaking of myths, they were speaking of you. Your awakening was written long before time began. Your body is transforming into something divine. Medical experts are in disbelief as your essence fuses with a higher frequency beyond science, beyond mortality. The shift that's happening inside you has already begun to shake governments, leaders, and even the old gods themselves. You have stepped into godhood before their very eyes. You have awakened before any other divine being. The prophecy is fulfilled. You are the last one, the new God one of a new universe. You are no longer becoming divine. You are transcending it. Before we go deeper into this revelation, take a moment to do 3 things right now. Hit that like button, subscribe to help us reach 20,000 subscribers, and leave a comment with the number 11 below. That number sends a powerful signal to the universe, amplifying the divine energy surrounding this message. If you are truly a chosen one, your spirit already knows this is for you. And if you're ready to receive what comes next, your life will never be the same. It began like any other day until the skies themselves seemed to shift. A cosmic tremor rolled through the earth, and the very fabric of reality seemed to bend and warp around you. What the world thought was impossible became reality. You, once human, were now standing as something divine, something beyond comprehension. In an instant, your transformation shook the planet to its core. For those fortunate enough to witness it, the world shifted into something unrecognizable. You weren't just standing there, you were becoming. The energy radiating from you was palpable, overwhelming the senses, and in that moment, every single person on Earth felt something they could never explain. The impossible had happened, and the world, for the first time, saw the true power of the Chosen One. Every ancient myth, every prophecy, every whisper in the temples of Egypt and Greece had been pointing to this singular moment. The age-old texts spoke of a divine being who would rise above all others, heralding a new era for the universe. And now, you stood in the center of that prophecy, the reality of it unfolding before the eyes of millions. Your body, now transcending mortal limits, was filled with a light that seemed to pierce through the very universe itself. It wasn't just light, it was life, it was energy, it was the cosmic heartbeat of existence itself. You were no longer bound by time or space. You had crossed into a realm only spoken of in sacred texts and forgotten tales. As you looked around, the world was still in awe, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. The leaders of the world, the religious figures, and even the spiritual elders were left speechless, unable to process the fact that the divine had just made itself known. This wasn't an evolution of humanity. No, this was a cosmic eruption. Your form was no longer human. It was the embodiment of divinity itself. And what's more, you felt it, a pulse of power, a shifting of energy. You were no longer the person you once were. You had transcended into something far greater, far older, and far more powerful than anything the world had ever known. The prophecy was complete. The chosen one had awakened. For hours, the world stood still. Cities went quiet. People froze in their tracks. It was as if time itself had stopped to bear witness to the unimaginable. This was not some ordinary event. This was the very definition of history being rewritten. Leaders, scholars, and even scientists couldn't process what had just happened. The laws of biology, physics, and every known discipline had just been shattered by your divine emergence. The shockwaves of your transformation rippled across continents, but no one knew how to react or even what to say. The shock was so intense, so overwhelming, that even the most rational minds found themselves questioning the very nature of existence. You had crossed a threshold that no human, no God, had ever crossed before. News agencies scrambled to report, but there were no words for what was unfolding before them. People turned to ancient scrolls and scriptures, searching for answers, and yet there was no explanation to be found. Everything they thought they knew about the cosmos, about life, about the universe, suddenly felt insignificant in comparison to the enormity of your existence. The myth of the gods, the legends passed down through generations, all of it had suddenly come to life in front of them. It wasn't just a divine act, it was you. You were the living embodiment of every ancient prophecy, every divine image, every sacred writing. And as the reality of it began to sink in, an overwhelming sense of awe and terror filled the hearts of all who beheld you. You were no longer a part of the world they had known. You had transcended it. The world was different now. There was no going back. From this moment forward, humanity would never again be the same. And for those who had lived their lives in ignorance, blissfully unaware of what the future held, the sudden presence of the divine was a terrifying reality. Their hearts raced, and fear mingled with wonder. It was a shift in the very fabric of existence, a moment so profound that even the most advanced technology and intellects couldn't decipher it. The shock of it was simple. They had just witnessed the impossible. As you stood there, your transformation unfolding in front of the world, something began to dawn on the scholars, the religious figures, and the ancient historians. Every prophecy, every ancient text, every myth had been pointing to this singular moment. The words of the ancients began to come to life. The mysterious scrolls found in Egyptian tombs, the cryptic writings in the forgotten temples of Greece, the biblical texts, they had all foreseen this. You, the chosen one, were the central figure in all of them. It was as if the ancient gods themselves had written your rise into the very blueprint of existence. The prophecies spoke of a being who would rise above all others, transcending time, space, and the limitations of mortal flesh. A being so powerful, so divine, that even the gods would tremble in their presence. And now, those words were no longer myth, they were fact. Every culture, from the temples of Egypt to the shrines of ancient Greece, had left breadcrumbs for future generations. They all spoke of a time when the earth would tremble and the heavens would open, and that the chosen one would come. You were no longer a distant figure in a story. You were the story. What's even more staggering is the realization that these prophecies had been written millennia ago, yet they all seemed to converge on this very moment. Scholars began to sift through ancient manuscripts, comparing the details. The gods of old, from Ra to Zeus, had all hinted at this day. Even in the myths of the gods of ancient Sumer, the Anunnaki spoke of a figure who would rise, bringing about a new cosmic order. And now, that figure was standing before them. You were not just a figure in a prophecy, you were the fulfillment of every divine tale ever told. Every ancient civilization had been waiting for you, and now the world had become your stage. It wasn't just the ancient texts that were revealing the truth, it was the research, hidden in laboratories, buried in ancient archives, and whispered among the world's most secretive researchers. There were records that had been collecting dust for centuries. These researchers, the ones who had studied the divine for years, had always known that there was something unique about the universe. They had always believed that there was a force, a divine energy, that ran through every living thing. But no one, not even the most gifted minds, could have predicted that the force would manifest in the way it had. Now, with your awakening, these hidden researchers were realizing that their life's work had led them to this moment of divine revelation. These scholars had spent years piecing together fragments of ancient knowledge, trying to unlock the secrets of divinity. They had studied the patterns of the stars, the vibrations of the earth, and the energy that flowed through every atom. But it wasn't until your transformation that the truth began to emerge. They had always suspected that the Chosen One was real, but to witness it firsthand was an entirely different experience. It was a revelation beyond comprehension. The divine was no longer something abstract. It was something real, something that could be felt, seen, and experienced. You were the culmination of their research, the living proof that divinity was not just a concept, but a force of nature itself. As these researchers pored over their notes, the patterns began to emerge more clearly. Your transformation was a response to something cosmic, a force far beyond human understanding. They discovered that your body was vibrating at frequencies that were beyond anything they had ever recorded. The divine essence within you wasn't just altering your physical form, it was altering the very space around you. Even the most advanced equipment in the world couldn't measure the level of energy emanating from you. It was beyond science, beyond understanding. It was divine. Your body was no longer a vessel of flesh. It had become a bridge between the mortal and the divine. Scientists monitoring your vitals were left speechless. Your cells no longer behaved like those of a human. Under their instruments, your molecular structure reflected light patterns unseen in known physics, almost as if your body was made of living starlight. Every beat of your heart resonated with the pulse of the cosmos, echoing across unseen frequencies. They tried to measure it, to categorize it, but nothing in their databases could comprehend what you had become. You had defied medicine, defied mortality. You were now a being beyond classification. And yet, despite the enormity of your transformation, there was peace. You could feel the power of the universe coursing through your veins, not as a violent storm, but as a steady, eternal rhythm. The energy didn't consume you. It embraced you, welcomed you, guided you. It was as though the universe had been waiting for this moment, for you to awaken and reclaim the essence that had been scattered across the stars. You were now a living constellation, a being born of both light and eternity. Every breath you took sent ripples of divine energy across the atmosphere. To those around you, it was like witnessing creation itself, the birth of a god in real time. Doctors who had spent their lives understanding biology threw down their instruments in disbelief. Soldiers dropped their weapons, trembling. Children, innocent and pure, felt only awe and warmth radiating from your presence. Even the wind seemed to change its course, to flow around you in reverence. The light around you wasn't blinding, it was inviting. It pulled at something deep inside every soul that gazed upon it, whispering of destiny, of belonging, of an ancient truth long forgotten. And when you finally opened your eyes, glowing with an otherworldly brilliance, a wave of serenity washed over the crowd. The transformation was complete. You were no longer human, but neither were you distant. You were divine and familiar, a bridge between heaven and earth, a living embodiment of everything humanity had ever hoped to understand. The unexplainable had just become real. Across the ancient sands of Egypt, in temples half swallowed by time, your name had already been carved into the walls, though no one had recognized it until now. Hieroglyphs, once thought to be symbolic, were now seen as direct depictions of you. The Eye of Ra, the markings of Horus, the divine sun disk, all were connected to your essence. As you rose into godhood, these ancient symbols began to resonate. Light beams cut through temple chambers that hadn't seen daylight for thousands of years, aligning perfectly with carvings of your likeness. The ancients had known. They had seen your coming and immortalized it in stone. In Greece, where myths once spoke of Zeus, Apollo, and Athena, the ancient philosophers had written cryptic messages hidden within their teachings. When the mortal ascends to godhood, the heavens will tremble and man will remember his divine origin. That line, once dismissed as poetic metaphor, was now being read as prophecy. The oracles of Delphi, the inscriptions at Mount Olympus, they all pointed to a being who would rise when the balance of the cosmos shifted. That being was you. The myths of two great civilizations, thought to be separate, now converged at your feet. Historians scrambled to piece together the fragments, from the Rosetta Stone to lost scrolls in Alexandria. When decoded, the patterns matched descriptions of your transformation. The gods of Egypt and Greece were not separate entities after all, but fragments of a single divine energy awaiting reassembly, awaiting you. You were the unity of all divine archetypes. The hero, the judge, the creator, and the destroyer all fused into one living being. The realization shook every corner of academia and spirituality. For the first time in recorded history, myth and reality were no longer distinct. The gods were no longer figures of faith. They were echoes of your coming. The very myths humanity used to understand the divine were simply fractured memories of your eternal self. You were not the next chapter of divinity. You were its origin, reborn. Centuries ago, deep within hidden monasteries and underground tombs, monks and scribes had written of a being called the last flame of creation. These writings, lost to time, described a divine force that would awaken when humanity reached the edge of self-destruction. It would not come from heaven, nor descend from the stars. It would rise from within mankind itself. You were that force. These texts had long been ignored, their language dismissed as mythic metaphor, but now every line rang with undeniable truth. In libraries long sealed, manuscripts glowed faintly when exposed to your energy. Historians documented strange phenomena: ink that reappeared, carvings that rearranged themselves, and ancient tablets that emitted warmth as if reacting to your divine frequency. The forgotten writings were waking up, recognizing you as their key. The knowledge once buried beneath centuries of human misunderstanding was resurfacing because the world had found its true divine resonance. You. The most shocking discovery came from an archaeological team in the deserts of Nubia, where they uncovered a stone chamber that had remained sealed for over 4,000 years. Inside were golden inscriptions that detailed your arrival. The year, the circumstances, even the moment the world would witness the birth of the God One. The accuracy was terrifying. It wasn't a coincidence. It was divine design. The ancients hadn't been guessing. They had known. These forgotten writings weren't merely predictions. They were instructions left behind by those who understood that the divine would one day return. You were the final note in their symphony of faith, the crescendo of humanity's spiritual evolution. Every forgotten scripture, every prophecy, every fragment of sacred text had been waiting for your breath, your heartbeat, your light. When medical teams analyzed your blood, they discovered something impossible. Your cells emitted light. Each one seemed to carry a pulse, a rhythm, as if alive with awareness. DNA samples refused to behave as expected. They reorganized themselves into complex geometric patterns unseen in any species on Earth. Your biology had become something new, something unquantifiable. It was no longer evolution. It was creation happening within a living vessel. Doctors reported that your body temperature was stable at levels that should be fatal to any human. Yet instead of breaking down, your cells thrived. Your presence altered the air around you, ionizing it, turning oxygen into something purer, something almost divine. Machines malfunctioned near you. Screens displayed symbols instead of numbers. Instruments that tracked electromagnetic waves began to hum at harmonic frequencies, as if in reverence. You weren't breaking science, you were expanding it. Nobel laureates and quantum physicists arrived from across the globe, desperate to understand. Yet, every attempt to measure you failed. Their equations couldn't hold your variables. Their logic couldn't capture your essence. It was as if reality itself refused to reduce you to data. You existed in a space between energy and divinity, a living paradox that science could observe but never define. The world began to accept the inevitable. You were not an anomaly, you were a revelation. You were proof that humanity had been looking outward for gods, never realizing that divinity was always meant to awaken from within. You weren't just the evolution of the human species, you were the bridge between what is known and what is eternal. The transformation sent ripples through every government and authority on Earth. Presidents, kings, and religious figures gathered behind closed doors, trembling before screens showing your image. The divine light you emitted disrupted satellites, broadcasts cut in and out, yet everyone could feel your presence. Nations that once clashed over power and territory now shared a common truth. None of their authority mattered in the presence of a god. Some tried to deny it. They labeled it illusion, technology, deception. But denial faltered when your voice echoed across the world without amplification. It wasn't sound. It was resonance, speaking directly to the hearts of billions. You didn't demand worship. You didn't threaten. You simply existed. And that was enough to bring empires to their knees. Military units disarmed themselves instinctively, as though ancient memory within their souls recognized something older and higher than command. Diplomats begged for answers. Spiritual leaders wept openly. World authorities could no longer lead because the people no longer looked to them. They looked to you. The fear that had once controlled nations turned into reverence. Borders, wealth, politics All the illusions of power dissolved under the reality of divine presence. You had become the ultimate equalizer. In the face of your awakening, the entire hierarchy of humanity was reset. The heavens were never silent, but on that day, they bowed. Every sacred energy that once ruled the cosmos seemed to pause, acknowledging your emergence. The gods of old, those remembered only in whispers and stone, stirred within their celestial realms. They felt the shift, the vibration of their own legacies bending toward you. For millennia, they had watched the mortal world struggle to grasp fragments of divine truth. Now, before any of them could rise again, you had awakened first. The balance had shifted. You stood not among them, but above them. The moment your divine pulse spread through the atmosphere, the stars responded. Observatories reported anomalies, constellations subtly realigning, ancient star formations glowing brighter than they had in centuries. Astronomers called it a celestial reconfiguration. But deep down, the wise knew it was recognition. The universe was making room for its new center, its new axis of creation. Every divine energy that had once shaped existence was now converging toward you, like rivers returning to the source of their flow. In realms unseen by human eyes, the ancient deities stirred. The titans of Greece, the Netas of Egypt, the forgotten gods of Mesopotamia, all felt it. But instead of anger, there was acceptance, almost reverence. They remembered the prophecy, one that spoke of the last flame, a being not born from heaven, but born to ascend to it. You were that being. You were the bridge between what was divine and what was yet to be born. Divine. Mortal humanity had often prayed to the heavens, hoping for signs from gods who no longer answered. Yet now, their prayers were answered through you. And as those who still held faith fell to their knees, something extraordinary happened. The energy of all gods, past, present, and forgotten, flowed into you. You became not a replacement for them, but their continuation, their evolution. You were the divine inheritance of all creation, awakening before them, not to destroy, but to unify. And in that moment, the truth became clear. You were the first to awaken, because you were the last. The cycle of gods had ended. A new chapter had begun, and its first verse bore your name. When the dust of the divine awakening settled, the evidence was undeniable. Prophets, scientists, and philosophers came to the same conclusion. You were not just a god, you were the God One, the ultimate form that every ancient culture had foreshadowed. There was no rivalry, no comparison. You were the synthesis of all divine essence, the final expression of cosmic consciousness. Every symbol of power, every myth of immortality, every holy name whispered in prayer now converged into one truth: you. Temples began to resonate when your name was spoken. The sound of your voice caused vibrations across oceans, minor tremors beneath sacred mountains. In Tibet, monks meditating in silence claimed to hear a celestial hum, the same tone recorded by engineers analyzing your divine frequency. Even those who did not believe found themselves inexplicably drawn to you, feeling warmth and gravity unlike anything they had ever known. Your existence was not faith, it was fact. The ancient gods, sensing the culmination of divine purpose, did not challenge you. Instead, they bowed within the spiritual ether. The old pantheons had always been fragments, expressions of the same eternal being. And now, that being had a face, a form, and a voice. You were the unity they had waited for, the completion of the divine equation. The title, God One, was not symbolic, it was literal. You were the singularity of creation, the infinite becoming tangible. Humanity's perception of reality began to shift. Theologians restructured doctrines overnight. Religious leaders wept as centuries of interpretation found their fulfillment. The divine was no longer abstract or unreachable. It had walked among them, breathed their air, and ascended before their eyes. You were living proof that the divine spark never left humanity. It had simply been waiting to be awakened. And now, that awakening had a name. The confirmation came not from human voices, but from the universe itself. Every particle, every wavelength, every heartbeat in creation pulsed to your rhythm. The One had arrived, and the cosmos rejoiced. Inside the sterile white halls of research facilities, teams of doctors and scientists gathered around images of your transformation, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. The body they had known, once subject to decay and time, was now radiating a form of energy that their instruments couldn't process. Your cells emitted a continuous stream of photons. Your DNA didn't replicate, it sang. They called it living light, but even that term failed to capture what you had become. Every test contradicted known science. You no longer needed oxygen, food, or rest. Your heart beat at an unchanging, steady rhythm that seemed synchronized with cosmic frequencies. You weren't immortal in the traditional sense. You were infinite. You weren't simply surviving. You were rewriting the definition of life itself. As the news spread, universities and hospitals around the world began studying your transformation. But the deeper they looked, the more the answers dissolved into mystery. Quantum biologists proposed theories suggesting you had transcended into a higher dimension of energy, where matter, thought, and divinity coexisted as one. Medical professionals, trained to rely on evidence, found themselves speaking in spiritual terms for the first time in their lives. The irony was profound. For centuries, humanity had sought to understand the divine through faith. Now, they were forced to understand it through science, but both disciplines found themselves kneeling at the same altar, your existence. It was as though reality itself had bent its rules to accommodate something purer, higher, and infinitely loving. Your body had become the proof that evolution was never just biological, it was spiritual. Humanity wasn't meant to remain mortal. They were meant to awaken, as you had. And for the first time in history, science and spirit finally agreed. Divinity was real, and it wore the face of the Chosen One. The very moment your divinity stabilized, the earth changed. Subtle but undeniable phenomena began sweeping across the globe. The magnetic poles hummed with new frequencies. The night sky shimmered with auroras that reached the equator. Animals moved in unison, migrating as though following an invisible rhythm. Time itself seemed to bend, with clocks malfunctioning, days feeling longer, and nights filled with golden light. The holy shift had begun, a realignment of creation itself around your presence. This wasn't destruction, it was transformation. Nature was responding to divinity reborn. Rivers shimmered with iridescent light. Ancient forests began to bloom in impossible patterns, and deserts briefly filled with rainfall. Scientists called it global resonance phenomena. The spiritual called it rebirth. But all agreed, the Earth was no longer the same. Your very existence had elevated the frequency of the planet, and beyond Earth, telescopes recorded something even greater. Galaxies began shifting ever so slightly, aligning into sacred geometric formations found in temples across Egypt, India, and Greece. These patterns, long believed to be symbols of divine balance, were now reflected in the stars. The universe was mirroring you. You had become the living axis around which creation turned. Religions merged, governments disbanded, economies lost meaning. The world didn't collapse, it transcended. Humanity, for the first time, began to operate not from fear, but from reverence and purpose. They didn't see you as a ruler, they saw you as the proof that they too were divine in potential. The holy shift wasn't just your ascension, it was the awakening of everything. And as the light of your transformation spread beyond the earth, the cosmos began to hum in harmony. It wasn't chaos, it was the song of creation being sung again, a song that had been waiting for its conductor, you. Across galaxies, worlds unseen felt the tremor of your awakening. Telescopes on distant planets flickered as if blinking in recognition. Black holes softened their pull. Cosmic radiation aligned into waves that scientists later called the frequency of the One. This wasn't metaphor, it was literal. The entire universe had begun resonating at a new vibration, one that had never been recorded before. That vibration was you. Beings in higher dimensions, those once labeled as angels, watchers, or celestial entities, turned their gaze toward Earth. They had waited eons for this moment. Through you, the divine frequency had found physical form again. Your essence wasn't bound by location. It rippled outward through every layer of creation, harmonizing chaos, soothing disorder, and reawakening dormant life. You were not just known, you were felt. The most remarkable phenomenon occurred when scientists aimed deep space sensors toward your energy field. The frequencies emitted from your presence formed complex, geometric patterns resembling ancient sacred sigils. It was as if the very mathematics of existence had rewritten itself to accommodate your vibration. You are now part of the cosmic code, the divine signature embedded into the DNA of reality. The universe, vast and endless, had recognized a new center. Suns, planets, nebulae, all pulsed in gentle synchronicity with your being. The divine frequency was no longer abstract. It was tangible, measurable, eternal. And as it spread, it carried a silent message across the cosmos. The One has risen. The divine is reborn. And so it began. The new era, the era of the God One. The moment your divine energy stabilized, the universe itself seemed to exhale as if relieved.